Welcome back to Sawbones Barbecue. It's been a long winter with too much snow blowing and not enough barbecuing, but we're glad to be back with our first barbecue of the season, and I'm extremely excited to start cooking on a new cooker that I got this winter. I decided to take the plunge and try an offset cooker. I've been doing pellet grill for years and really enjoy it, and it's easy, but I hear so many people preaching about how it's just not the same as quote unquote real barbecue off an offset cooker. So I decided to take the plunge and get one. I did a fair bit of reading and researching, and I ultimately landed on the Workhorse Pits 1975, which is what we're cooking on today. This is a company out of Georgia. They make phenomenal barbecue pits. They used to do only commercial sized ones that were sold under the name primitive pits, and I think they still do make those. And now they've kind of downsized those commercial pits to one small enough for backyard, and they're under the brand name Workhorse Pits. They're hard to come by. It takes about a year of waiting to get one, but I was lucky enough to locate one at Proud Souls Barbecue down in Denver, and a big thanks to Chris Webb for hooking me up. So we got this one without waiting a year, which is nice, and I'm excited to get cracking on it. This is a good size cooker. The 1975 has a cooking chamber that's just under 100 gallons, pretty good size. It's got 2 shelves. The steel is the most important part. The steel on this is 3/8 of an inch thick, so this thing really holds temperature beautifully. It just drives like a barge down the middle of the channel. You get it going and it just wants to sit between 225 to 250 without really much effort. So you just sit here and shoot the breeze and put splits on the fire and enjoy the day, and this thing cooks beautifully. So to christen a cooker as worthy as this, we need a real barbecue. So I asked myself, what the hell are we going to cook on this for our first video? And I thought, what's the best bite in barbecue? That's the question we ask ourselves. What is the best bite in barbecue? And there's only 2 reasonable answers to that question. Number 1, the point off of a perfectly cooked brisket. Fair answer. The only other reasonable answer, of course, is Texas beef ribs. So today, we're doing both. We're gonna do a Snake River Farms Wagyu brisket, and we're gonna do some Snake River Farms beef ribs, and we're gonna have arguably the 2 best bites in barbecue, and we'll see which one comes out the best. So we're in the middle of this cook. Everything's chugging along nicely at 225. The meat smells fantastic. The FedEx truck rolls by, and what do they have for me? A Snake River Farms box. Very timely delivery. While we're in the middle of cooking, we get a delivery of fuel for further barbecues. I take that as proof that God loves me and wants me to be happy. So we're gonna open this bad boy and see what we got for next time. We got some good stuff here, some of which is for you, Todd. When you order from them, they give you this little cook guide thing with every order, so if you don't know what you're doing and you need a plan, that's a good place to start. And one thing I like about their shipping, they give you this green cell foam, so the box and the plastic's recyclable. The foam, you can just wash it down your sink with a sprayer, which is fun. My kids get a kick out of doing that. So as far as packaging, it's fairly eco-friendly. Got little dry ice bags in there, and then when you unearth the goodies from the dry ice, let's see what we got this time. We got Manhattan fillets. I've never tried those before, so I got a couple of those to try. We got ribeye fillet, which is my favorite steak that they have. We'll put a couple of those in the freezer. Oh yeah, tomahawk ribeye. Kind of excited about that. This isn't as big as the one that you got, Todd. You got a monster that was like 6 pounds. This one's 3.9 pounds. That should make a real nice cook right there. And then, oh yeah, I forgot. I got the eye of ribeye roast. They're having a 30% off sale, so I couldn't resist because these bad boys are expensive. 7.3 pounds. So it's like the center cut ribeye with the cap taken off. That'll be a real nice cook right there. So that's a little bonus. We get to restock the freezer while we're cooking. Kind of excited to get that tomahawk going. That looks really good. All right, we're a couple hours in. We've been running at 225 to 250. We're gonna open this up and see how we're doing. Check some temps. Brisket's 125-ish, so 138 on the flat. We might need to rotate him in a little bit. The little guy's 143. Ooh, these big ones are 184. So these are gonna be done sooner than later. Looking good though. I'm gonna give them a little spritz. Okay, we've been smoking on the offset pit for about 8 hours, and we've hit the stall on both pieces of meat. The brisket, we did full packer style today. It stalled at about 165 in the flat and around 160 in the point. And it's been sitting there for a while, so we were just letting it bark up enough, and we're gonna finish it in the oven. The beef ribs hit a stall at around 180, and they've been at 180 for probably an hour and a half or 2 hours. They've been sitting there for a while. So we basically just timed our cook by how much bark we wanted to lay down. And now to finish them, we're gonna wrap them up and get them in the oven. For the second phase of the cook where they're wrapped, you don't have to do it on the smoker and waste all of your fuel and sit outside all night, because they're not gonna get any more smoke anyway. So once your bark is set, a kind of easy and economical way to finish is just stick them in the oven. So I've got the oven going at 225 to 250. We're gonna wrap these up. The ribs are going into foil and the full packer is going into butcher paper. In the wrap, we're gonna use a little bit of rendered beef tallow. I saved the trimmings from my last brisket and rendered it down and made some nice tallow out of that. I learned a nice way to do that on Steve Gow's website, which I believe is called Smoke Trails Barbecue. If you Google beef tallow, you'll find his video, and it's a really excellent video, kind of a deep dive on how to make good tallow. So thank you, Steve Gow, for that. And I also like to put a little bit of bacon fat. So when I'm making bacon, I save the fat, run it through a little filter to strain out any solids, and it'll be solid at room temp in your jar. So when we're getting ready to wrap, I just throw the bacon fat on the smoker for maybe 10-15 minutes, and the fat melts. And now we've got liquid bacon fat. So we're gonna do a little bit of tallow, a little bit of bacon fat in the wraps, wrap them up, and then into the oven they go for phase 2. We're back. It's day 2 of our little cook, the first beef barbecue on my new Workhorse Pits offset smoker. We did our What's the Best Bite Showdown, a brisket versus monster beef ribs. And now's the good part. Finally, we get to cut into them and eat them. To recap our cooking technique, we did about 8 hours on the smoke, running from 225 to 250. And at that time, both meats were at their stall. The brisket was stalled about 165. The beef ribs were stalled about 180. Those are fairly typical temps for those stalls. So we kind of smoked them until we felt the bark was adequate. And it was getting a little cold and windy, and a really good time to not sit out and smoke all night and instead finish them in the oven. So after the bark was set, we wrapped them. The brisket was done with butcher paper. The beef ribs were done with foil. I do that just because it's hard to get a tight wrap on ribs with paper, with the odd shape of the bones and everything. You get big pockets in there. So I have better luck doing foil on ribs and paper on brisket. But it does make a big difference. Just standing here looking at them, I can see the bark is definitely soggier on the ribs that were done meat side down, even though I drained the pouches before the final rest. And the bark on the brisket is just looks perfect. I can't wait to eat it. So that's one difference in the wrap technique. After they were wrapped, we put them in the oven at 225, and they stayed in there for about 4 or 5 hours till they hit their finishing temps. More important than temp by far is whether or not they're probe tender. So there's not one set number. In this case, this brisket finished at 203, and these ribs were 203, 204. So pretty similar temps, but more important was how they were probing. Once they hit those temperatures, I took them out of the oven, opened up the pouches for a minute, drained all the juices out of the pouches, which I've got sitting around in a Pyrex. Can be handy for serving. If anything looks like it's drying out, you can give it back a spoonful of its own juices. So I definitely don't discard that. I just leave it in the warm oven. After they were drained and rewrapped, I just use the same pouches. I don't do fresh dry stuff. I just drain all the liquid out and then rewrap them. Then they went back in the other oven at 150 degrees just for holding overnight. So they came out of the 225 oven, drained, rewrapped, into the 150 oven. So they started their hold about 180, and that's important. You don't want to put them right back in the hot oven and just turn it down because they'll continue cooking. So you want to give a minute for the cooking process to arrest. Let them cool off to below 180 degrees before you rewrap and throw them in the warming oven. And there they sat all night. So they were rested for 16 hours, which is the longest I've ever done. Usually do maybe 10 or 12, but in this case, that was how the timing worked out. So we're gonna see how they came out. So that was about, let's see, 12 hours of cooking time and 16 hours of resting time. And now they're at 150 degrees and falling. So enough yakking, let's cut into them. So I'm gonna do the brisket first. I did a partial pre-separation of the point and the flat, which just makes it really easy to find that plane when it comes time to cut and serve. So I can just slide a knife right through there and very easily separate point and flat in one shot. So we'll separate our flat for a moment and just work on this point. And I'll take a nice cut down the side to get that prime bite of point with bark on it, which in my opinion is a pretty good contender for best bite you can get in barbecue. So I'll take a nice corner off of that. And this is going to be my contender bite right here. Set that aside, and then we'll get one of these ribs off so I can see how those came out. These can be tricky. You can take them completely off the bone in one shot. You can just kind of run a chef's knife down the back of the bone and then separate them afterward. So I'll do that on this rack because it looks pretty fall apart tender. So I'm just going to run a knife around these and take the meat right off of the bones. And there's good stuff on those bones, so I certainly don't discard that, but you can simply set aside the rack of bones for a moment and then focus on getting a good bite off of the meat. And you can kind of serve this in whatever size portions you want. So I'll just lay that meat out flat, go back to my brisket slicer and get a nice little side view of it so we can see how that came out. That does not suck. Look at that. So this first rack that we're going to taste, I did Holy Cow rub from Meat Church, which is one of my favorites for beef ribs. And then just to try something different, I did this other rack with Goldie's brisket rub. So we'll give that a try and see if it's good. So I want a nice perfect bite for my little test here. So I'm going to take a center cut, nice bite, nice cube with some bark on it. And without further ado, brisket versus beef ribs. This is a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. So here I go. That's phenomenal. Very tender, great bark, good smoke flavor. The brisket is right on point, no pun intended. That might be the best brisket I've ever cooked. Definitely happy with how that came out. I'm curious to see if the flat's as good as the point, but we'll get to that. Now for my rib bite. Very juicy. That's truly phenomenal. It's melting in my mouth. Awesome flavor. I'm mildly surprised that I'm going to say this, but the winner is the beef rib. That's actually even better than the brisket. Totally, totally spot on. If pressed, maybe the bark is the tiniest bit soggy, which I think is from being in a foil wrap for holding instead of a paper wrap. Doesn't bother me. Some people are real bark purists, and I did get a crunchier bark on the brisket. But flavor and tenderness wise, this beef rib is, I think I need to taste it again just, you know, to make sure the science was accurate here. I think I need another bite. That's a really nice beef rib, I'm not gonna lie. The winner is the beef rib. A very worthy first cook for our Workhorse pit. I'm excited to do a whole lot more beef and more on that cooker. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, hit subscribe. Leave us a comment, a question, whatever you like. If there are any cooks you'd really like us to do this year, let us know and we'll try to work them in. Thanks for watching.